the way I think about it is that IP, whether it's patents, trade secrets, copyrights, database protection, whatever, is a tool. Open science is a strategy, and both are in service of a goal. So you always start off with, what am I trying to achieve here? Then you say, well, what strategy best gets me there? And it might be open science, it may not be. And then how do I implement it? And even open science has components of uh, intellectual property. So we can think about open source. Well, it's based on copyright. So these are not, we often put these as opposing concepts of open science and intellectual property, but in fact, they're just at a different order. We're asking different kinds of questions. Open science itself is a multitude, comprises a multitude of strategies. It at least comprises the efforts to make data public, to make publications freely available, to make tools available through such things as open source licensing, and in some domains, make materials available. But it often goes beyond that and includes a requirement that if there is any intellectual property, it be available to others. Could be, through individual licensing. It could be within a group. Everybody within the group has access to it. It's called a club good. Or it could be the absence of intellectual property that prevents other peoples from making alternative products. So it comprises a whole bunch of different ideas, different strategies within this idea of open science. The fundamental core of open science is that we do science better when we do it together. So there are some areas where an individual lab or an individual firm could just go run with it and they don't need any output from anyone else. Fine, open science isn't your strategy. But increasingly, and especially with AI and AI data that feeds it, we need collaborations. None of us can do this alone. No firm can do this alone. No sector can do it alone. And so we need collaborations. And so fundamental to the idea of open science is how do we create collaborations, partnerships, where people can actually work together without undue barriers in doing so.
So no matter how smart you are or how smart your research group is or your company, you can't possibly compete with the rest of the world, especially in your subject area, but really in any area. And what open science does is allow you to recruit everybody else on your team. Usually you don't have to pay them either. And so if you're looking for the maximum possible innovation in any particular area, the best interest of solving the problem that you're trying to solve, say for Canada or your company, would be to have as many people working on it as possible. And so the open science approach means that you share something that's valuable. And the more valuable what you share is, the more likely you are to get other people to glom onto you and actually help you. So you mentioned AI. If you look at what's underlying all of AI now, it's open source code. If you look at all of the supercomputers in the entire world, they're all running open source. And they're not doing it just because it's free. They're doing it because it's technically superior. And it got technically superior because you had tons of people working on it all over the world at once. And when you find a way to harness that economically for your business or for your country, that's when you're going to win. And the US is a very good example of this right now. There was kind of the birth of open source software, which led, I think, eventually to open source science. They're very mature now. The entire internet running, all of this stuff with AI, IoT, I think it's like 80 some odd % is running on open source code. The reason that all of that is happening is you have dozens of companies all over the country constantly working together, driving it forward and creating value that they can then extract for their shareholders or for themselves.
Just give a couple of examples of what Conscience is doing. So it's a nonprofit building a community of open science drug discovery. And so one of the things we're doing is exactly what was asked for, helping tech transfer offices, VPR offices in constructing contracts around open science, because we have expertise on that. We're aligned with the Structural Genomics Consortium, who pioneered these agreements. So that's the first thing. But let me give you a concrete example of how open science can work in terms of developing value. So one of the projects Conscience has is called CASH. Please don't ask me for what the acronym means, but it's aimed at uh, artificial intelligence to find a hit for different medical indications. So right now, the state of the art in AI, despite all the hype, is not very good. There's no reliable AI that will produce hits, let alone uh, you know, lead up, getting to leads, optimization, and so on. So what we've done is we set up an open competition where we identify a target and we ask all kinds of firms, AI, other computational physics, whatever, to propose molecules that will bind to that particular target. And then we buy from a Ukrainian company, actually, the molecules, and we put them through the lab at the Structural Genomics Consortium to see how well they bind, et cetera. We give the companies these AI companies the data, and then we release it to the public. The ones that do better than most go on to a second round where they get to propose more molecules and we test those. The results are all made public, but the firms, the AI firms, use the data in order to improve their own models. At the same time, the entire industry benefits because they're seeing, they get descriptions of the approaches taken and they see which ones are working better, which ones are working less well. So we've got investment from pharmaceutical companies because they're interested in understanding which AI models. We're obviously targeting Canadian AI firms. So Molecular Forecaster here in Montreal is an active participant. But we also reach out to around the world. And in one of our competitions, a team in Brazil actually won the competition. So, you know, they would have been ignored, and now we shone a light on them. So all of these firms benefit. They have IP in their models. They benefit, but the entire industry benefits because the data is out there that they can build on. Canadian firms, you know, are part of the discussion. They get to showcase themselves before the pharmaceutical companies, which are their clients in the end, and we mediate that. So open science has many ways to contribute to the economy without the institution taking IP, but leaving that to the private sector. As I said, though, there are other areas where IP is completely appropriate, where putting on one product onto the market doesn't prevent others from building on it. We see this in many like new novel fibers, et cetera. And so getting a little IP gives you a little bit of advantage in the short term. It all depends on the industry, but open science is practically helpful in terms of advancing the economy.
Many different open source models to make a successful company. And I think, unfortunately, in Canada, we just don't know about them. So just as a quick quiz, everybody can see the logo on my sweater. How many people in the room know what that is?
Here.
One. So this is the Open Hardware Gear. And in America, there's an association, like a trade association of hundreds of open source hardware companies that make hardware, like physical things that you can buy, everything from clothes to electronics to computers, all different kinds of stuff, manufacturing equipment. And when they release the newest product, they also release the source code for it. And so unlike software, that source code would be the bill of materials, maybe electronic schematics, design files for the mechanical parts. And that sounds kind of crazy if you're used to the conventional idea where you're going to manufacture a product, you patent it, you probably don't even tell everybody exactly how you made it. And the whole goal is to keep it protected. And there's kind of like three different models. So in North America, we have the hard patent thing, which means that if somebody patents something, I'm not allowed to do research on it. I'm not allowed to make it unless I paid for the license. I can't touch it. In Britain, it's more like the MIT license, which says you're allowed to do research on it and you can make it for personal use. You just can't sell it. And then there's the open source license, which says you're allowed to do anything you want with it. as long as if you make an improvement, you reshare it with the same license back to the community. And that last viral bit is why open source does so much better at innovating fast, because you have lots of different people working on it. And so within those hundreds of open source hardware companies, they all have different kinds of models that they use. So if you're talking about a specific company and you're not a one-trick pony type place, so say you're an electronics firm that's making a bunch of different types of electronics, by open sourcing the designs for what you're manufacturing and selling, um, you don't have to go through the patent process. You save all the money from that you can push into engineering. And then because you've made the plans available, people like me are very likely to take it up, hack on it, make it better, reshare it with you, and then you can use that product as your next version. And so we had SparkFun come to the campus last year. The CEO of SparkFun, he started his company literally out of his dorm room, where he was making a couple of electronics, making it available on the web. People started to buy it. And because he did a very good job of making good documentation, many people started to follow him and buy his stuff, including me. And now I forget they're $25 million a year, hundreds of employees, and their churn is incredible. Like almost every day they make a new product. Well, how does he possibly do that even with all the employees he has? It's because all of his customers are helping him. So that's a model within kind of like a standard model. The one that I use most often in the university to get companies to give me money is I'll call it a secondary supply model. And a good example for this is an enzyme company. So I'm an engineer. I do solar cell stuff. I know zilch about enzymes. I've never taken a biology class. So why would an enzyme company offer me tens of thousands of dollars to help them? It's because I open source something earlier for a biologist. So like hopefully with Susan, I collaborate with people from other disciplines. They bring up interesting problems, and then I take that as a personal, like an honor challenge. Like I have to be able to physically solve this problem. And so one of my collaborators was working on water test samples. The testing units that they took into the field cost $2,000 a piece. He wanted to do this huge big thing over this massive area, and he didn't have enough money to be paying everybody $2,000. He's like, well, can't you make something for me? And so using an Arduino, which is an open source electronic platform, very inexpensive, very well documented, thousands of applications. I made a little colorimeter for him that was able to match the performance specs of the $2,000 professional version. So I solved his problem, but rather than just solving his problem, I solved everybody's problem in that whole field because we open sourced how we did it so that you could manufacture one yourself for about $50 and make as many of them as you wanted. And so that happened, and I wrote a nice paper about it and kind of forgot about the project. And then a couple of years later, this enzyme company came to me and they were like, we sell a lower cost version of a colorimeter. So ours was like $250. And it's really intriguing that yours can do the same thing and hardly costs anything. And we want to enter new markets. And so up until that point, they'd only been at the high-end scientific market. And their goal was to sell enzymes to like test for nitrogen in soil or in water. And what they wanted to do is to broaden their scope to go after the agriculture market, to start getting students interested in using their method. And so by funding me to make a version specifically for them, not only did they get a much better version than my original open source version, it's far improved. It works on any cell phone. You can data log it. It's a really nice tool. It is scientific grade research now in the hands of everybody, but then they sell the product. And so they didn't ask me to help them to sell more spectrometers or colorimeters. They funded me to sell more enzymes because now the cost of entry to do scientific analysis for anything containing nitrogen in it, water, soil, leaves, stuff for cows, like all of that, was so low that anyone could enter. And yes, maybe they cannibalized a small portion of their market by people making it themselves in their home labs or maybe at their high schools, but they still had to buy their enzymes to make it work. And that same model works for every single company. So I usually don't try to compete head to head with the company that I'm trying to get a sponsorship for. I try to increase their market share. And if I can show them that they're going to get more sales, they're in. And then they want, like, you have to make it so they want it to be shared more. You want people to copy it. That's how you see success, when thousands or tens of thousands of people are downloading and using your device or buying it from different spin-off companies in order to help the company that you're originally kind of aiming to partner up with. So those are just a couple of examples, but this is not, it might be slightly fringe in Canada, but this is not fringe. There's in every sector now, there's open hardware companies. Open source software is so proven to this point Like it basically is the standard model of doing software. And if you do it closed, that's something kind of off to the side. Um, it's becoming very uncommon in that field, at least.
Yeah, I mean, we talked about a number of open source models, but it would be great, I think, for me, or maybe it was for other people in the audience, if you could walk us through the pros and cons and details about some of those licensing models. So, for example, if I release something on a non-commercial license, I had the case that I released something on a non-commercial license, and the company approached me, "Oh, we really want to make a product, but you release it on a non-commercial license. What does it mean for us?" Um, Also, with the reuse versus a patent open source license. When, in your experience, how do these different models work, and when are they actually, stumbling blocks in building a partnership with the company?
Well, that's a great question. So I'd say, in terms of partnerships, you can't beat the purely open source model. It's just too easy because like everybody can immediately partner with you. And
commercial,
yeah, your commercial
use, but with the obligation to make public any advance.
Right.
Is there a hurdle for companies that they say, well, we don't want to use this because we need to then make it public and we can't patent it?
No, you're right, and probably that's clearest in some of the software patents. So some companies are afraid to bring open source tools into their toolbox because then that forces them to open everything up, and that's specifically what those viral licenses were designed to do. So, but I would say that that's a more modest problem. Like for every one company that won't use your stuff, 10 others will. The bigger problem, especially in Canada, is that the way that we think about financing businesses. And so the standard model, you get your patent, you protect it really tightly, and then you go after funders, more or less like the VC model, where they're going to own a portion of your company and they want to see massive returns in order to put cash in. And when you look at the VCs, their success rate's really tiny. And so they have a huge bucket of cash. They hand it out to a bunch of companies. One of them hits, the rest lose money. And maybe like they don't care about your technology at all. Whatever you were trying to do, that's completely immaterial. You're just a black box that makes money. There's so many other ways to do it now. So patents actually were the first open source technology. The deal was you got a patent, but you had to open source the tech, and you were allowed to completely keep everybody out of that market for 20 years. And back in the time of the steam engines, that maybe made some sense because they weren't moving so fast. But now we can move really fast. And that impetus that you need billions of dollars in order to do something that just isn't true anymore. So, you could set up an online shop to sell whatever it is that you made today. You can do a Kickstarter today and immediately test the waters to see if your technology is ready for a mass audience. And you don't have to go after the gold plate at the first try. Like maybe you just need to buy a new manufacturing tool. And so you say, I'm doing a Kickstarter. It's to buy $100,000 manufacturing tool. If I hit that goal, then I can make these things and sell them at this price to the people that are potentially interested in it. And so the barrier to enter a new business is amazingly low now. You can set up a business with Ivy's help in a day and start going and selling your product. And that like leveraging the open source model gives you access to maybe more customers than you're used to, or that vast innovation cycle. But it also kind of relieves a little bit of the stress in that you don't have to worry about getting all your patents in line first. You don't have to put a ton of money into lawyers. Maybe you'd put almost no money into lawyers in the beginning. And so you can get your product to market faster. And at the rate of innovation cycle that we're at now, like use your cell phone as an example, a 3-year-old cell phone is already getting pretty dated. 3 years in anything is kind of old now, let alone 20. And so even if you do get a patent, will that be making money for you after 6 years or 10 years? Like it might if you get really lucky. But in most cases, like your time to make money is right now. Who can get to the market first? You had the idea first, get to market first. Get the IP based on copyright so that you can build up a brand and be able to monetize that. Maybe have other people manufacture in different countries for you. So there's tons of ways that you can still make good money. Hopefully the technology that you're working on is doing good things for humanity. So you want to see it spread as much as possible. Using the open source way as a way to really accelerate that to get it out into the field. And not every idea we have is a good one. And so that's also one of the big advantages. Let's say you run your Kickstarter and you was something super modest. Maybe you just wanted to buy some paint to make it a different color. and you made it for $50 and no one bought it, it probably is not worth additional effort, and you can move on to something else. So you can try and fail really quickly so that when you have the ones that succeed, you can go all in.
Sorry, I have one question, and it's really kind of wrapping it up, but also thinking about if you could offer a researcher in your field advice on commercializing their research, what are your suggestions that you would offer?
Where do you want to start? Aaron, do you want
So, we've had that scenario quite a few times. Researchers have come to us and with an idea, in fact, graduate students with an idea of commercializing innovations out of their research. So we can give them advice, and then some have already spun off companies, and the barrier they face in our sector, the devices are not small, inexpensive, where you can just use open source information and get the product very quickly and start selling. It requires quite a bit of money. It requires maybe millions to be able to get to manufacture the device, test it, go through regulatory approval, and so on. So it's very expensive. And so the advice is how, when they think about spinning up a company, is how they're going to raise money to be able to develop, manufacture, and sell that technology. And that's the pipeline. The length of time could be many years, 5 years of development. So in this sector where it's very expensive, the key, of course, is being able to raise money. So our experience is always in going to raise money. The first question, one of the first questions, is the technology protected? As the IP around that? So the advice we give our graduate students, if their innovation is going to be that expensive sector, requiring millions of dollars to be able to bring it to market, to protect it, to file patents. If it's a device that's quite inexpensive, very easy to manufacture, then we don't file patents. We just publish it, and everybody can use it. So that's advice. Of course, we give them advice about more than just that, but that's a key element. That's early on. We give advice to our grad students who are considering spinning off a company to file patents. And so this is what we do.
to?
Yeah, I mean, I guess I'm trying to think of a one thing, and I don't know that there is just a one thing. You probably know your field the best, and your own knowledge is part of it. You've heard a diversity of solutions and experiences today. Similar to what Aaron just said, when we're looking at something that's going to become a highly regulated healthcare product, where it's going to go through FDA approvals, and that's where we're on the more protected end of the continuum. And when it's something small and easy to transfer, we've just freely shared things as well. So I don't know that there is just one answer. And it comes back to what was said at the beginning of today, is what is the goal? But the mechanisms, which I think you did a good job of pointing out, of how a product is going to get to the end users, and the regulatory requirements in healthcare applications in particular, and probably other industries as well, I don't know those other industries, is a significant consideration for the companies that when we're licensing, I'm looking at Nadine right now, when we're licensing our healthcare software, which is a protected thing, that gives us a mechanism for keeping it stable, quality control of implementation, and other things that matter in a healthcare context. I will completely agree with Josh's point that what that does is puts up significant barriers to others hopping onto that train, making it better for us for free. Like, that doesn't happen. And that conversation, like, we've been asked, why don't you open source this? This would be the benefit. And it's that would be a big decision. But it's not a conversation that isn't happening. So there's always more than one way. And learning about the ways and talking to people about the pros and cons of what they've had. So our context has been highly protected through trade secret and license agreements, not patents. That the advantage of that is that it's allowed us to formally license it, have some mechanisms when there's problems, avoid partnering with problematic partners, and that's a much bigger conversation now than it ever was before. And the revenue stream that it creates, which comes back to the university, not to individual people's pockets, allows us to staff on the implementation quality control side that helps with the regulatory for the companies that we license to. So we actually test their implementations and make sure that they have been implemented to the standard. And if there wasn't a revenue stream back to us, I don't know how I would staff that. So thinking about what the implementation looks like, because you can't just absorb that into your lab. Like you can't, you're not staffed for that, right? That isn't what we do in research labs. We train graduate students and stuff. So it is an extra layer of work and effort, and there needs to be some mechanism of resourcing that. And if there's a way to do that with open source, I'll ask Josh.
So the first thing I would say is get rid of all your preconceptions. Also get rid of the idea that there's one solution that applies to everything you're doing. And I'll just give you an example. I work in the area where we have the highest regulation, right? Drug discovery. And so extremely high cost. And even there, open science works because it's not only are you completely open or not, but also your choice of intellectual property. So I had a firm that has a proprietary platform. And they were working on a product for a neglected disease that affects a pretty small population. And their first instinct was, well, we should patent it and then, raise money. And so I asked the obvious question, who's going to pay for it? Who's going to invest in a product where there's no market? And, can we think about other ways to raise money? If it really is a neglected disease, is it on the WHO list? Are there foundations that are interested, governments that might fund it? Can you use research grants to fund your development? But it'll be much easier to appeal to them if you're going to say, I'm going to make this as accessible as possible. Patents help you not a whit, their cost. No VC is going to invest in you, so just drop that and think about other ways you can do it. One of the ways we've developed is through using regulatory exclusivities, but giving all the data away and enabling countries to develop it. And then, what are you doing with this asset? Well, you're giving a project to your team that it highly motivates them. If they're solving a real problem in the developing world, you're going to be able to attract and retain really smart people who want to see that, this is not just about money, this is about helping people. Second, there are reputational gains. I might be making money on other products, but here I am, I'm developing this drug. And it's going to help the world. So we got to get out of this binary view that there's one model that applies to the whole company. There's only one form of intellectual property that works. You got to think creatively. And going back to your earlier question about tech transfer offices, I would hope that tech transfer offices can walk people through that kind of conversation.